All right. Hey, what up, folks? Welcome back to Honestly Speaking. As per usual, I am Honest-Leigh. How are you doing? Hopefully, you have a tribe that you are pouring into and one that is pouring into you. Um, so yeah, we're trying this on a few new platforms. Hopefully, individuals will be able to see that we are live. We're trying to see exactly how this works. So yeah. Do you all hear that clicking? Matter of fact, let me just I can hear clicking of buttons. I think it was Crystal. For whatever reason, this is extra um loud. So folks, let me see. We're still trying to figure out how to work this um technology wise. Yeah, we're still trying to see how to work this technology wise. Let me see. Uh yeah, we got people coming in. Come on in, folks. Come on in, folks. Come on in, folks. Come on in, folks. I see individuals tuning in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, I'm going to try to figure out. I don't know how to pull up people's comments and highlight them. I am in the process of learning how to do all of these things. So please be gracious with me. Yeah. Please be gracious with me. All right. So just making sure. So last week we talked about a number of things. Last week we talked about trauma and triggers. Before we get into that, because we're testing out this new technology, does anyone on here want to talk real quick? Anyone? You can feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to everybody coming in.
All right. Let me see. Sorry about that. Again, please bear with us as we are trying out some new things here. All right. Yeah, I got 6 people watching. Hey, Dunamis. Dunamis says, peace, everyone. Nice to see y'all in here. All right. So tonight we're talking about traumas and triggers. I know a couple of people saw me share some of my story earlier today on Brother Berean. So I may have some of those come in. And like I said, on that particular channel, most of the time on this channel, I do talk about spiritual stuff, but we basically talk about life on life terms. So today we're talking about trauma and triggers. So if you are a saint or if you ain't, feel free to engage in the chat, in the comment section, and leave a like, share, and remember to subscribe and tell your friends about it. And feel free to comment. So yeah, we got 12 people watching right now. All right. So, and just reviewing from last week. Last week we talked about trauma, right? So for those who don't know, I am a clinical therapist. That is what I am. And we talk about trauma all the time. For some of you who don't know, a quick way to describe what trauma is. Trauma is something that happens when you feel like it's too much, too fast, and too soon. Too much, too fast, and too soon. So because something is too much, too fast, and too soon, it keeps you from responding in a normal way. You don't feel like you can be yourself. So that's it. It's something that sticks with you. And so from trauma, you can have these things called triggers. Now you can have triggers even if they aren't from trauma, but a trigger is when something happens to you or around you and it incites you to a response. And typically you feel like it's a response that you couldn't control yourself. Okay. So you can't control the fact that it impacted you in that particular way. All right. So that's trauma and triggers. Now, We talked about it. Please go back to the video on my Facebook Live and see the video from 2 weeks ago, when we talked about what it is, what are some of the things that causes trauma, and a number of things on how we deal with trauma, right? So in talking about those things, today we're actually going to talk about ways that we cope with trauma. So, real quick, what do y'all think? And feel free, just unmute yourself when you want to talk. And for those on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to write stuff in the chat. I don't have a way right now to pull it up, but I do see that people are putting things in the chat. Like I said, what's up to Brother Dunamis, who's watching this right now. So again, what are some ways that we cope or don't cope? Or matter of fact, what does it mean to cope in your particular opinion?
Great question. Coping, in my opinion, is how you deal with a traumatic situation or something. It doesn't have to be traumatic, it's something that bothers you. I think some of the ways, I'm going to go to the second part of the question, some of the ways we don't cope is that we try to ignore our feelings instead of actually feeling the emotion that's going through us. A lot of times we try to, it is what it is. I'm cool. I got this. But I think the best way to cope is to actually feel that emotion so that you don't become overwhelmed by it later because you're bottling stuff up and holding on to things that you necessarily shouldn't.
Right. Dunamis in the chat said, yeah, we're taught to just deal with it, quote unquote, just deal with it. Do y'all think that men and women are taught to cope with things differently?
Absolutely. Men are taught to man up. Women are taught to, wait, before I get into that. When you're a Black woman, if you express your feelings in a certain manner, you get that angry label. So some women, particularly Black women, are taught to tame their emotions past a certain point, but they're allowed to have more emotions than men. Men are typically taught to man up.
What does that mean?
I still haven't figured out 40 years on this earth, and I still can't figure out what the actual real meaning of man up is, because it seems like it means don't have emotion, which is impossible for any human or any living thing besides probably a plant or a tree, which we can't measure their emotions. But we see mammals and all types of animals show signs of anger, happiness, aggression. So humans, being the most intelligent life force on the planet, so we think, how are we supposed to not show emotion? And men are supposed to lead, and men are supposed to set the tone, but without emotion, like, how is that supposed to be effective? And typically I think that's what the term man up has meant, versus, and it's not healthy, versus actually feeling the emotion and being able to process and then assimilate and get it out in a healthy manner. When people say man up, they typically want you to stay in control or control the whole situation, when you can only control how you respond to a certain extent.
Crystal, do you think that women are told to respond to certain emotions in particular ways that affect how we cope?
I think women have to navigate a lot on a daily basis. So although it's not conscious, some things we're not consciously told we can't feel them. There are instances where we are told. I think you're absolutely right about the angry Black woman stereotype, but then there's also, women are labeled too emotional. Like any form of passion, any form of excitement, any form of indignation, is too emotional. You're being emotional right now. Um, and then you have the counter thing where women also, not the counter, but the also, where women also have to navigate um, environments that can often be toxic as it pertains to gender, sexuality. Like women have to deal with so much more inappropriateness when it comes to how we navigate just in the office. Like I remember being in the office, just walking by, and you have to deal with comments, you have to deal with um, inappropriate gestures and things like that, and you're supposed to stay level-headed and maintain some level of professionalism while this person is literally violating your space. So I do think that it is on a daily basis women are kind of encouraged to stuff.
So Emily said, who is supposed to teach us how to cope? Like, so that's what Emily said in the chat. Great question, Emily. The short answer is our parents. Our parents are supposed to teach us how to cope. The elders in the community are supposed to teach us how to cope. Any leader is supposed to teach us how to cope, right? And so just like what Marcus said, coping is just how we deal with stuff. I got on the shirt today. I don't know if you can see it. It says it's okay not to be okay. And for some people, they don't think that that is a good thing to say. That's actually countercultural in light of what Marcus said. I do think that as women, we are allowed to break down certain emotions, but we're not allowed to be angry. Like the main emotion that men are allowed to show, women are not allowed to show. And please, I say this often, and I'm going to keep reiterating it. Anger is a secondary emotion. It is never the first thing you feel. If you see someone who is angry, they are usually hurt and or afraid. You break my heart, I want to break your face. That's kind of how it works, okay? That's what the whole Lemonade album is about. That's what James Brown, The Big Payback, is about. He said, I need some get back, remember? So I think that it's important for us to remember that. Really quick, before I move on to the next question, I really just wanted to ask y'all in the past, okay? Think about when you grew up. How would you cope? Like how would you cope? Yeah.
I think that I developed anxiety probably around 9 or 10. Um, Before that, I would say that I would say I was somewhat parentified. I would figure out I would need to take care of someone. So if there was an emergency or there was some type of um, situation, I was the oldest, so I typically tended to the younger children. Like that was like my role, my responsibility. So therefore, I wasn't really in the moment. I wasn't really dealing with what was going on. I was focusing my energy on caregiving, I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
Okay.
Then anxiety started, and then I would say as a preteen teenager, detaching.
So as a preteen teenager, detaching, and then then you do you think you taught yourself to stuff it?
Um, do you think I told myself to stuff it?
I'm asking. This is not a therapy session. I just want to know, do you think you taught yourself to stuff it? Because a lot of times with anxiety, a lot of times people don't understand that anxiety usually comes from an unresolvable fear that an individual has. Okay, so it usually focuses on what has happened or what could happen, and it keeps us from being present in the moment. Anxiety robs us of our future joys and reminds us of past like debacles. So that's important. So that's why I asked. I don't want to fill in what I think it would be.
No, I think that the anxiety and the detaching were simultaneous. I am a survivor of abuse, and I detached when I was being abused, and I was typically anxious in between.
Got you. So I see that Dunamis put in a YouTube chat. He said, "Only time a man is allowed to cry is after he's won a championship or maybe he injured, but only for a minute." Yep, yep, yep. And thank you, Charisa's Charisa. Yeah, what's up, Charisa? Shout out to her. She was giving a shout out for the definition of anxiety, and a question to us from someone in the chat. It says, "So how do you deal with someone whose coping mechanism is just that?" And then they say, "I have an older sister that does that to me, becomes overbearing and intrusive." So how do you deal with that? In your opinion, like what would y'all do with it? And then we'll talk about we're actually going to get into some ways to help this individual, but before we even get to talking, how would y'all deal with that?
So I've learned to I am learning to remember that the same way I have a story, other people have a story. So I try to kind of talk through where things are coming from. For example, I have a sister who gets extremely passionate when she talks. And for a long time, this caused controversy for us because her passion translated as yelling or or hollering or arguing to me, and those things don't make me feel safe, which makes me shrink back. So
Wait, can I stop you right there for a second?
Yes.
Did y'all hear what she said? Because what she said was crucial. She said her sister, she's talking about me, her sister, her sister has a way of communicating that triggered her responses to either past trauma or even her just natural disposition. So for those of you who know, like I'm loud when I talk. Like I literally, when I listen to myself talk, I'm like, please turn the sound down. I try to lean back from the microphone at times. I'm loud. Now, to women, oftentimes to women who were told to not have a voice, it makes them feel like I'm yelling at them and they're afraid. And to men who were taught that yelling is a form of aggression, they see my voice at times as being disrespectful. Whereas with me, I'm just being passionate and in the moment and can't figure out, hey, if we're at a sporting event, why can't we talk like this? And then when we leave the sporting event, still talk like this. And I come from a loud family. Folks, believe it or not, I'm one of the quietest people in my family. Like if you met my family, you see her smiling, we just come from some loud folks. So the first thing Crystal said do, which I agree, and fellas chime in, feel free to chime in, is understand who it is you're dealing with. So when you're talking to somebody who has a particular style of trying to quote unquote cope, and their style of coping is almost intrusive, it can be overbearing and abrasive. She's saying understand who you're dealing with.
And the way you do that is by talking to them, not by speculating, not by assuming. You have to engage, which means you have to push past whatever your initial response is in order to hear from them so that you can understand them.
And I'm going to say this, before you even do that, you have to be honest with yourself about what you're feeling. Like you can't be like, oh, that didn't bother me. That didn't bother me. We have a nephew, right? And so my nephew used to lie all the time and say that he liked hot stuff when he didn't like hot stuff, but he was real prideful at the end of the day. But I like hot stuff. And so I guess because I was the quote unquote cool aunt, he would try to impress me and be like, Auntie, I like this, I like that. And so I would give him some and I would say, don't waste my food. And he would taste it. This is something that Jonas would laugh at. He would taste it, put the chip in his mouth and start chewing real slow and be like, it's not hot. It's not hot though. It's not hot. And I'm like, it is hot. And and then I would say, eat the whole chip. I don't want to because I don't like it. Why don't you like it? So he couldn't even push past his young. It was partially pride, and another part of it was he thought I would shame him. So it was fear mixed with pride. And a lot of times we have to be self-aware to know where we are to see if this is really a trigger for us, or is it something in us that's just irritated with this particular person? Because let's be honest, sometimes, folks, I don't care who says what. I could quote somebody and people will receive the quote until I tell them who quoted it. Let me get on depending on the stream. Let me get on a conservative stream and say, you know, I believe that we need to have audacious hope in today's times. They'd be like, yes, sister. And I'd be like, yes, that's what Barack Obama said. What? He's an antichrist. Burn her. You heretic. You know what I mean? Boom. And then on the flip side, I can go on somebody on the right and I mean on the left and quote, like, look, we should have never been in Afghanistan as long as we were, and we need to pull out, and how we pull out is important. Marcus would say pause to that. And I would and then the people would say, yes, that is true. And I would say, yeah, because that's what Donald Trump said. What? I can't believe you quoted Donald. So oftentimes how we perceive the person will determine if we even listen to what it is that they say. So we need to be honest about where we are and then have a proper assessment of what's going on with them. So have a proper assessment of us and have a proper assessment of them. And according to Crystal, not take the moment we do that, we're no longer taking what they said as personal. And it is extremely hard when that person is a sibling or a spouse or a significant other or a child. Nobody gets under your skin like those individuals. Nobody.
I would even being a teacher, an educator, like, hey, a teacher to student thing. It's like, hey, you may be in a classroom where you do something wrong, but you feel as though you need to hold on to your space as an authority figure. So you'll shame the student instead of like retracting what happened, making it right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But something like, so we're going through these trauma informed workshops and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I guess I always ask these questions of if someone's going through a trauma and you trigger them and you don't know, but their response is to in turn shame you for how you responded to them, like, how do they deal with those situations? Because I think that's a layer on top of it where somehow we expect people to understand us. And I'm like, I remember this couple that was married for 40 years, and they're like this, we still are learning and to understand each other. And so we want these popcorn. You should understand what's going on with me, even though you didn't grow up with me, live in the same household. You had a whole different socioeconomic background, maybe a different political view and everything, right? And so you should understand. But it's like, why should I understand when I'm still figuring me out? You know. So I just want to throw that out there because I think that and to what Crystal was saying is like trying to understand someone, but I think at the same time it has to be a mutual understanding where my trauma and trigger is not traumatizing you, because I'm like, deal with me, and I'm still trying to deal with me. Me.
Okay.
Yes, as I was going to finish the story. So we recently had a conversation, probably in the last 2 years, where, because what was happening was I would leave conversations emotionally when Liana would get loud or Lee would get loud. And
you saying my government?
I'm sorry. And it would hurt her. So I'm upset, and now she's hurt. And the way she described it was so great. Like when we finally talked about it, she was like, it's like we playing outside and you don't like that I, did a particular thing. So you take your toys and go in the house. And I never really like processed it that way. So not only am I hearing where things come from for her, but I'm also hearing how I come off in response. And I think sometimes, I know for me, and I can't speak for anyone else, I can tend to see myself as the victim very easily.
Mm.
And
Why
so
is that? Why is that?
Oh man, girl, it's not a counseling session. You already said this.
Yeah.
I think because um, I don't feel validated in other areas where I am the victim. So
Mm.
um, I will often, I'm constantly seeking that validation.
Wait, can we pause
So
right there? Can we pause right there? Number one, just thank you for your honesty. Because a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to be that vulnerable, especially in front of a number of people. Like, I know we only have almost 20 people watching now, but it will be more that will watch this. So thank you for your vulnerability. And folks, did y'all hear what she said? She said, if you don't get validation in one particular place, you will begin to look for that validation in other places. I said this before. My professor said it was true. Our deepest deficiencies become our greatest desires. Period. Wherever you lack certain validation, you will look for it in other places. So thank you for saying that. And so you're looking for this. It's kind of touching on even what Coach Jay said, because you were somebody who was wounded in ways that you may not have recognized that you were wounded. So when I was just being my beautiful, natural, loud self, you were being offended. So sometimes how we naturally are will trigger other individuals' trauma in ways that they don't even understand until they're triggered. And even then they may not understand it. They may just recognize something is off here, which is why when we start talking about what is necessary for coping is very important. So I hope we begin to answer that question, Dunamis. If you just keep listening, we're going to talk about 5 things that we're going to get into that is necessary for us to walk in and really in like freedom in certain areas. So all right, so Emily said deep, Crystal. Hey Denise. Hey Queen. So as we go further, let's talk a bit. Anybody else want to talk about how they were coping when they were young? How were you taught to cope when you were young?
I was never taught to cope. So when things would happen when I was young, I just sucked it up or compartmentalized it, threw it in a box, locked it away. Maybe 5 or 10 minutes went by to feel the emotion, but there was never like a safe space to express any feelings. Like that was never, and if there wasn't unsafe, there was never a safe and healthy space to express feelings. There also wasn't a toxic environment, but the safe and healthy space wasn't set up. It wasn't something that was welcome. It wasn't something that was, expressed, if you have whatever's going on with you, what's, talk to me, or what's on your mind, or how do you feel, just in general. And I don't think it was intentional. It's just that I grew up in a different time where, that boy a little tethered is what they considered, when it came to mental health. Like somebody had an issue that, that it was like they talked about him a certain kind of way.
Right.
There wasn't
He's special.
Yeah. There wasn't the openness and the even education, I guess, or awareness that there's a whole spectrum of mental health that doesn't just reside with not being able to function on a day-to-day basis as what we deem as normal. Like you can have anxiety or in battle with things like that on a daily basis and still go to work and still be productive. But then you have to still come home to your family if you have a family.
Yep.
Maybe you don't. Maybe that's why you have anxiety, because you don't have anybody. But maybe you have kids and you're overwhelmed. But I just know growing up, the conversations that we're having now, like I was never privy to that as a child, or even understood that there was a mental health field, that someone could go to therapy for losing a loved one, or your parents separating, or any of the things that go on normally that, you know, most of us on here have been accustomed to. Like all of us have lost a loved one. You know, some of us have come from homes that were once whole that became broken during our lifetime. Some of us grew up in broken homes our entire life. But I know where I was at, I never was exposed to any safe, healthy coping mechanisms or exercises to nurture that kind of thing in me. I had to seek that when I got older, and had to make sure that I tried to build those kinds of parameters and set those kind of boundaries up for the people that I love and the people that love me.
Yeah, I think that everything you're saying is very true. It's just that I think where most people struggle is the fact that, sorry, I gotta block somebody who's just like coming in with like Bin Laden up in the chat.
While you do that, I'm gonna just jump in while you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll say for me, it's interesting. So I grew up around, well, with my grandparents on my mom's side, and for majority of my life, I think until I was almost 10, my great grandmother was alive. And so she grew up in Harriet Tubman's time, right? So she's been alive in like late 1800s through uh, late 1900s, right? And so for her, it's like take care of your kids, make sure they don't get hurt. So her thing is like, I don't have time to deal with these emotions because I have things to take care of. And
Talk
then
about it.
with my grandfather, who marched with Dr. King, was a part of big in civil rights, especially in Philly, and things like that. It was like, hey, as a man, his father wasn't there. And so it was like he took care of home, church, and community.
Right.
And worked his job. I'm not even sure if my grandmother worked or not. Even if she did, it wasn't like a full time thing. Not that I know of.
Right.
And so it was just like, well, my image of him was, you take care of everything. And I don't have all this time to do long talks. Is that you have to make sure you do things a certain way so that you're not a threat. And so for me, like, it was like, all right, you just work hard, you do what you have to do. You know, I mean, so it's like, it's times where if I was upset, I go to the basketball court. If I was mad about something, I go to the basketball court. I'll go to my backyard, do some workouts. Sometimes I hang out with my friends and talk to them about it. But that's kind of where my thing was like, hey, don't die in your anger or whatever's going on. Find something to do. Put your time and effort and energy into something else. And if that comes back around, you figure out how to deal with it when you're finished something that's productive. And so that's kind of where when I go into. So if something happens, I'm like this: where can I be the most productive? Forget that. Be productive somewhere, And then if I can figure that out, I'll try to figure it out. But if it's going to take away from productivity, then I don't have time for it.
Yeah, I think that's extremely interesting. I think a lot of times, like, young people of today often like try to, I don't want to say shame, but sometimes we shame people from the quote unquote greatest generation ever as being emotionally stunted. And I do think that to a degree there is validity in that claim, but part of the reason why they even have the ability to while we even have the ability to say some of the things that we say is because they made the sacrifices that they made. So when we hear stuff, oh my gosh, I can't stand it when we hear stuff like, don't mess with me, I am not my ancestors, I will do da da da. What are you talking? You're literally only here because of your ancestors. Or when we like get excited about like that quote from Black Panther that Killmonger made, bury me in the sea where my ancestors chose to jump ship versus going into bondage or whatever he said. I'm like, Killmonger, those wasn't your ancestors because you here. Your ancestors was the ones that survived and actually had children and procreated in order to make you. So I think we need to put some respect on the fact that people that bit their tongue so that we could yell. We need to have some respect on the fact that people that quote unquote sucked it up so that we could learn how to heal. Now, on the flip side, there is a lot of criticism of younger people for being quote unquote sensitive. Now, some of it is valid, and the valid aspects has nothing to do with the younger people. That's from us. Our parents are the ones that made that whole self-esteem movement trash. Like, they did that. So now you got young people caring more about feelings than facts, and as a result, what's happening? You have young people who are already prone to be self-centered. As young people, you're prone to be self-centered, but now it's higher levels of entitlement, higher levels of apathy than generations before. So it's a number of things that that came into play here. But what I want to talk about really quick, just to pivot, is when we talked about traumas and triggers, right? And now we're talking about ways to cope. So we talked about how we struggle with coping because 1, we weren't taught, 2, we were taught incorrectly, 3, we got trauma, 4, other people's humanity are impacting us, and 5, we didn't see it modeled, right? And all of these things happen with the first thing that is necessary to cope well: introspection. We spoke about it. So really quick, just to give a brief definition, introspection is the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes. Okay. So it's when you think about how you think and you think about what you feel. It's one of the reasons why I even created this platform. For me, I want people to engage in critical thinking because I realize in society, we're extremely reactionary and we don't even realize that we're reactionary and that people have put batteries in our back half the time. So when we think about introspection, how often do you think, like, matter of fact, what age did you start practicing introspection? Like, when you think back, when did it happen, and how often did you do it, or do you do it? I know those are 3 different questions, but have at it.
15, 16.
15, 16. Okay.
Probably the first time I went to a therapist, which I was a little bit younger, but I wouldn't say I was introspective, my first therapist. But the first time I went on my own, like not related to family dynamics, was probably like 15 or 16. And I think at that point was when they start asking me the questions, what do you think about that? Or how do you feel about that? But I would say that's the first time I started doing it. When it became a practice, like a regular intentional thing, was probably in my 20s. And I think it was largely due to relational influence. I think that's why it's important to have people model it or have safe spaces to engage in that way. Because I think in a lot of ways, my relationships, my tribe, have influenced my ability to do that.
Mm. Yeah, I loved how you said your tribe influence your ability. I also believe that one of the things that happens often is the fact that for me, well, is that we don't really realize when we first started thinking critically and having that introspection. Um, Partly because of how I'm wired in my profession, I think about how I think. I think the first time I started having some type of introspection um, is when I want to say when my heart first got broke. And I think my first heartbreak was a family member. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with me that they don't love me in the way that I know I'm worthy of being loved? So I had to begin to ask myself certain questions. Like, and I began to evaluate myself through wounded lenses. And also, my mom taught me to pray at a young age. So I began to pray what's going on. And when you're a kid, you don't have the language to say certain things. So I actually believe that introspection starts a bit younger for some, because I did think about how is this the right way to think? Well, what about this? And typically at the age that we now call adolescence, you start to question. It's when you start to think more abstractly, when your brain starts developing in a particular way, you can kind of think about like personhood and things like that. What about you, fellas? Oh, and shout out real quick to Dr. Kyle Glover, as well as Dr. Elaine Augustine. Hey, name. Kyle said, Dr. Glover said, the inability to cope was passed down generationally. Therefore, we're left to figure it out on our own. I totally agree. And Dunamis spoke about how strength comes in many different forms, from many different forms. He and I definitely agree. I think a lot of times we, in order to try to get men in touch with their emotions, we can like soften men up unnecessarily, because you can be tough and tender. You could be both. But I think we unnecessarily try to soften men up. So speaking of which, brothers, men, did you have anything you wanted to say on introspection, when you started having introspection? And yeah.
I would say when I was like 5, because I was always told to do the right thing. But when I saw people get away with doing the wrong thing, and if they did the right thing, I started thinking, how can I do this? So
that's a good point.
That simple thing is that so it's like once you saw people do wrong for the wrong reasons and right for the wrong reasons, and got praised for both, I started questioning why do the right thing if it's more lucrative to do the wrong.
Yeah, I think that. Well, wait, Marcus, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, he took it. He went with it, because I honestly can't remember when I started doing introspection prior to being 29 or 30. That's relatively like right there, like soon. I don't really remember doing that stuff as a teenager or I don't know, not on a serious level. Like, I guess we all did it at a certain point, but I didn't start actually holding myself accountable for stuff until I was grown, I guess. And
Bruh,
like
I
trying
know
to
I'm the oldest
use
person
that
on
to
here.
become a better person.
You're not.
I'm the oldest person on this this call right now. But
Who
don't be
said
talking
anything
about
about that?
29 or 30 like it was just right there. You way past 29 or
Whoa,
30.
no,
Right?
it was like right there.
He said it like he tried to cap up like for some young Philly watching. Like 29 or 30 was just behind me, baby.
Full
Nah.
disclaimer. Full disclaimer. I
I think
embrace.
to Marcus's point, right? I'll say, well, kind of piggybacking off of something he said was, I didn't think about it seriously, right? But I'm like, as you said that, I'm like this, as a basketball player, I'm like, all right, they did this move. How do I stop this move? You start thinking about it. How do I get around this guy because he's much bigger than me, right? This dog is chasing me. I got to figure out how to get away. Like, so it's on small levels that you start thinking, and then you start adding those ideas to bigger, more crucial things as we get older.
So why do y'all think we resist introspection?
Why would you want to deal with your own bullshit? Like, when you do introspection, you got to pit up with your own BS. And if you ain't ready to be tired of your own BS, then what's the introspection for? Like, to do introspection means I might have to hold myself accountable for something. Or I can just be like, I got this, and continue to do whatever it is that I'm doing and ignoring. Like, most of the time, there's an alarm going off somewhere in your head. Like, you need to check something out, or stuff around you might not be working to the best of the ability that you thought it would be. And instead of looking inward, humans' natural response is to point outward and say, no, it ain't me, it's blah blah blah, or I'm a Scorpio, so blah 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 blah. No, motherfucker, you.
All right, so just disclaimer, folks, if you have children, please know that not everyone on this panel has the same standard when it comes to language. Okay, and we all have different varying beliefs. Okay, so I don't want anybody hitting me up like, who was that bull cussing on your thing? It was Coco Marcus, but that's okay. All right, so we just want to
government.
Yep.
Oh,
he did.
He tagged in a post.
We all tagged in posts. So
right.
What did it say, Jonas?
It says what it says. I'm just.
Jonas refuses to call Marcus the Coco King for whatever reason. He refuses to call him that.
I told you could just call him CK.
You trying to get me? I'm like,
I told you. I said you just call him CK.
All right, so folks, so did either of you want to talk about why? And somebody could put in the chat. Like, feel free to put stuff in the chat. I see Ucheche, my brother Rajiv, is watching. And what keeps you, what keeps you from having introspection? Marcus said, who wants to look at their BS?
Yeah.
I'll even add on to what Marcus was saying, is that like I think, I don't know, I feel like there are a lot of like platforms and mediums that say, hey, you don't have to deal with your BS. It's someone else's job to do it, right? So I'll say, hey, it's not a parent's job to teach their kids stuff. Go to school. You get it there, right? And I ain't gonna hold you. At some point, I'm like this. Well, if my kids would shoot 8 hours a day, he got it from you, but it's like, no, but it's still like 16 more hours in that day where he's getting a lot from what you're allowing to be learned. And so I think, that's another piece of it, is that some of our mediums, medicine and things, put the responsibility on other people to deal with someone else's trauma trigger. Okay. So they don't have to be introspective anymore. Happiness is bliss.
And ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
And ignorance is blissness, and being on your way to hell and thinking it's going to heaven. That's what my one friend said. Wait. Before Crystal speaks, Charissa says something, and I think if I think I got Crystal pegged, Crystal's about to speak to the very thing you talked about. So go ahead, Crystal. Say what do you think keeps people from? No. I want to see if I'm right. It's not a question. It's a comment.
Comment. Okay. So I think that it is lack of ability if that makes sense. If that makes sense, I think that dealing with introspection is hard. It is not easy. It's hard to do on your own. You need some type of outside outlet or support. Now, that can range from God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit to a professional therapist, to a pastor, to a friend who's really good at listening and ask the right questions, might have the gift of counsel. I don't know, but I think sometimes it's just hard. Like it's the lack of awareness on how to do it because you either did not see it modeled, or you are not in a position or in a space to kind of practice it or engage in that way. It's not something that, in my opinion, I don't think that it's something that matures naturally. Now it can happen naturally, but whether or not it matures and escalates to the length in which it produces fruit, I think requires some intentionality.
Okay. So what Charissa said was, regarding introspection, we may shy away from it because we don't want to feel the pain of the choices that we've made.
Yeah.
So that was a combination of what Crystal and what Marcus said. We don't want to Marcus would just say we don't want to deal with our bleak, right? And
I'm sorry,
you were
but I'm
saying
not PC.
and Crystal said because it's difficult, meaning it could be painful. I think also Emily said avoidance equals denial, and denial equals a false sense of safety. Facts, right? And then I see Ucheche says we avoid introspection because we always want to feel like we fit in with our thinking, and not many people are okay with standing out, or even for the right reasons. That's true. That's true. I think a lot of times, I'm gonna speak personally. Sometimes I don't want to have introspection because I know the right thing to do, and I don't want to do it. Right. And then other times I don't have introspection because I'm afraid of what I might see, and I may not know how to deal with it. There have been times, I don't know about y'all, but it's been times when I've looked into the caverns of my heart and I've seen a monster. And I'm like, whoa. And one of my professors said something in college. He said, until you are aware of the monster that lives in the cage of your ribs, the degree to which you are ignorant of that monster is the same degree to which you are dangerous to help others that you want to help. So to the person that's like, I'm good, I don't trust that person. It's like the person that say that they don't get angry. I'm like, oh, we got a live one, folks. You say you don't get angry. Woo, you're angry all the time. From a therapist, if somebody walks into a therapist and they're like, I'm good, I don't know what's wrong. I don't get angry at all. I'm just even Steven. You may be a sociopath. So there's a lot of things that go on. Like sometimes we don't want to look at it because of the ugly, but how we look at it is important too. I think oftentimes when we look at certain things and we don't bring the right lens, that like it colors how we deal with everything. If the only tool that I have is a hammer, well then everything gonna look like a nail to me. Like it's just how it works.
Can I also say
But
this too? I think that, like, to kind of expand on what I was saying before, some things are just that heavy, like just that hard to process. I'm in my opinion, some things require help. And I could be wrong, but I just believe that everyone at some point in life should talk to somebody, whether it be a professional therapist, a really good friend who can counsel, whatever, should talk to somebody because there's so much to talk about, so much worth being talked about. But sometimes things are too much. for you to process on your own. And I think it's okay to be honest with yourself and say that, but it's not okay to ignore getting the help you need. Like, it doesn't mean don't process it. It means find the help so that you can process it.
Right. Dunamis made a question. He says, would you say that people live through movies, historical fiction? Is this a means of introspection, or are they just running from themselves? What do y'all think?
Yes, have some.
No, I'll say yes. To that question or statement. People are running from yes. They're living through historical and fictional people, and they're trying to live up to, like they said about like LeBron said, he's chasing a ghost. He's trying to live up to what Jordan did or what someone else did. Everyone's trying to live up to somebody's expectation. And then, with the whole, Jason, LeBoy, whoever these people are, the spiritual word people on Instagram posting stuff, and you see things like this, and it almost sounds like you. And so now you become a jerk because, like, you saw someone post multiple memes about, like how you don't have to take anyone's mess. So I think that, and actually it was crazy because I had wrote a whole rap about it because I was like, yo, this is so dumb that we just live off memes. And it's like, these are our modern day scriptures. And so, instead of being able to quote what someone wrote, they'll be helpful to you and society. It's more about how to break down society for your pleasure.
So I'm sorry, I want to cut you off. Go ahead.
That was it.
So to answer Junior's question, I do think that some people movies, any form of artwork has the ability to cause introspection. Like, it inspires us to do certain things. Yes. However, we also use those things to escape. There is a way when we can get caught in the paralysis of analysis and not do anything. We just stay thinking. That's not introspection. That's rumination. So ruminating is when you relive, something over and over and over and over and over again. And shout out to all the gift girls that's in the chat. I see you, Barb. I see you, Andrea. I see you, Denise. Love y'all. Right. Miss Elaine is also in the chat. Y'all. So yeah, shout out to all y'all. Gift girls, stand up. It says the responsibility, Elder Cox said the responsibility falls on the one, okay. He's asking, is it a stronghold? This is from a Christian perspective. It can be a stronghold. And for those who are watching it that do not know, a stronghold is a binding that you have that you yourself cannot break. It's not just, it's supernatural, and it's also a mentality. You can have a stronghold in your mind that you can't break. So it's like the world would say it's a particular bad habit, but biblically speaking, it's bigger than that. It's not just a bad habit. It is something that you need help to break. Think of it like a straitjacket on someone. It's kind of like that. All right. So could it be a stronghold? Yeah, it could be a stronghold. However, strongholds still bow to Christ. So they break. And he is our strong tower. So that's thank you, Elder Cox, for that. All right. So as we move on, so we established already introspection is important, right? We talked about why we don't want introspection, but at the same time, why it's necessary, and how we look at ourselves is also important, right? Really quick, as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about what is the importance of having I'll put the next one was having healthy standards. What's the importance of having healthy standards?
What does that mean?
Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. So one of the things we talk about here is you will never see us talk about something without defining it. And part of the reason why we define things before we speak about them is so that we can be on the same page when we talk about stuff. Because what happens is we end up talking past people, you know? Like for instance, one group of people says make America great, and they hear that and they're like, "Oh, that means live like Leave It to Beaver." Another group of people hear make America great again and they hear, "Oh, Jim Crow." Explain what you mean when you say certain things so that way we can at least be on the same page about what's being said and we can agree to disagree rightfully, because we may not be disagreeing. So what I mean by healthy standards is standards that allow you to operate at optimum health mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Okay, so what is a standard? A standard is a means by which one lives. It's benchmarks by which one lives. It's morals and beliefs that ones hold themselves to, by which they live, that will enable them and actually will keep them within a particular parameter. So I say all of that to say what? A healthy standard is a metric by which one can assess whether they are operating at their best mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and maybe even socially or financially. So that's what I mean when I say that. So why is it important to have and we could talk about how it, like what is good for me could be different for you. We could talk about that because some people may feel like, hey, that's healthy. Boom. We could talk about that all day. I don't have a problem with that. But why is it just important for one to even have one? Forget what yours is and what mine's is, because mine's may be different from yours and we can compare. But why is it even important to have one from the beginning?
I think that healthy standards, one, give you boundaries as a person. It helps you to identify what the boundaries are, to identify what your measurement is for what's healthy. Shout out to Gift going from unhealthy to healthy. Right. So it helps you to identify what is unhealthy, and it helps you to set the I guess the measurement or the standard for what it looks like to get to being healthy realistically. Otherwise, I kind of feel like, and this might sound like I made this up, but it's the difference between surviving and thriving. And I think as someone who has spent the majority of her life surviving and I've had to be intentional, especially in the last maybe 5 years, about what thriving looks like. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different experience. I would say sometimes when you survive, you kind of miss life. It kind of happens. It kind of happens to you instead of you experiencing it. So without those healthy standards, you're kind of just surviving. You kind of just like life is just happening to you. It's just throwing you whichever way you'll go. So.
Anybody else?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no clue what's going on because I've had connection issues. So I'm kind of lost.
Why is it
when you and Jonas had exchange, I don't know what was said and what Jonas's response was. I know there was a laugh and then it swirled around, and then I come back into Crystal telling us how much thriving is better than surviving. So hey, yeah, I'm still here, but yeah. Hey guys.
All right. So really quick, just to catch you up, we were talking about why is it important to have healthy standards. And Jonas, being the natural contrarian and deep thinker that he is, automatically challenged, what do you mean when you say that? Why? Because that is important. And as somebody who thinks a lot like Jonas, I do, I automatically think, well, wait, I'm that kid. that's going to be that person that's going to question those particular things. So I'm not doing it just to be provocative or controversial or contrarian. I'm actually doing it because young people think like this. So I'm asking these questions. So what do you mean when you say healthy standard? So I define what a healthy standard is. I didn't say what each individual healthy standard should be, to which Crystal started talking and said, like having boundaries was important. And she wasn't the only person that said that. I believe Elder Cox said the same thing in the chat, talking about it's important to have healthy standards are important because it helps you to create boundaries. Also, really quick, Brett said, some days we thrive and some days we survive. I'm with Crystal. That's true. You're not always going to do that. Sometimes surviving is your thriving. Depending on what we're going through, that's why we can't look at people from the past, from the long, long time ago's days, and try to judge them based on our current standards of what it means. Oh, I can't believe it. Oh my gosh, what did they do for feminine products? How did they? Well, we here, so thank God for the now, because I don't want to go back. I don't know about y'all, but I ain't trying to go back, right? So I think a number that it is important, just going back to healthy standards, I definitely think it is extremely important for us to at least set a standard. Set it. You can adjust it and you can look at it, but if you don't have one, then you'll constantly be lying to yourself and floundering back and forth. But if you set a standard, you'll be able to tell yourself where you broke your own standard, where you, or how you raised it, or how you lowered it. But it's important that you set it. Go ahead, Jonas.
So do you set the standard and boundary for you or for other people?
It's both. It's both. I think that when you say, and when you say, just for clarity, when you say set the standard for you or other people, when I say both, I mean how you engage with other people. I don't make somebody live by my standard, if that's what you're asking. That ain't what I'm saying.
Okay. That's what I see. That's what I see happening. Not saying, okay, but I'm just saying, like, in society, like, they're saying you have boundaries. Your boundary is not really on you. Is like, your boundary is like, I set my boundary. You respect my boundary, not me respect my boundary.
Yeah. So you see people being hypocritical and contradicting what their own standard is, and that we see that all the time. Yeah, we see that all the time. Especially, I can talk about the number of identifiers that I go by. As women, we can do it. There are certain things, it's called a double standard. When we can do it all the time, there are certain double standards, and there are certain double standards that I don't mind having. I don't mind being able to wear pants and a skirt. I don't. Yeah, they're actually skirts. It's skirts. Chill. Not me, but chill. We're not even going to go there. So, I didn't even know I never thought that it would have been coming from you, Marcus. All right.
I got Scottish on my other side of my family.
A kilt. That's right. But
never mind. I'll leave Westbrook out there.
So yeah, I was literally just thinking about Westbrook. But anyway, so there are certain things that are double standards, right? And we don't complain about the double standards that work in our favor, and then we don't. And there is hypocrisy involved in a number of things too. So I think having a standard, I don't want to belabor it, but having a standard is important because it will be the thing by which you measure life. And it connects to your beliefs. It connects to, I know for me, having a standard connected to where I saw that I was falling short. And speaking of seeing that we are falling short, right? We got about a good 20 minutes left and about 3 more things to talk about. So I want us to like speed it up a bit, but really quick, accountability. Let's talk about it. We might not even get to the last ones because we talk about accountability. right? So really quick, anybody wanna start it off?
You got to ask the question. You just said a word.
All right. So before all right. So accountability is the fact or condition of being responsible, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. So it if you're responsible for a thing, right? It means that you have an obligation to deal with something, right? So go ahead.
It seems like it kind of goes back to introspection, right? So it's like you being introspective means that you have to hold yourself accountable, right? And then you have to allow other people to hold you accountable, right? And now going and also tying in the whole idea that we live off of fictional historical movies, people, all these. I think there was who said that? Someone said it in the chat saying
Dunamis said it.
Right. And so with all of that, I'm thinking about how accountability, like I don't even know if people really not even desire or want to be accountable. In a sense where we'll do all of our dirt and then we'll wait till our deathbed to say that was wrong. Right.
So you're saying to the people who feel like, well, I could just sin down and repent later. Like I've heard people say that, like on my deathbed, you don't know how God's grace gonna work. On my deathbed, I could get it right, and I'm like, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Like I saw. Think of how. So, I'm not a fan of Jay-Z. I think he's a pretty good rapper on some things when he's not taking other people's lyrics. But
Marcus, don't, because that's going to derail. Like, this is
Jonas. That's all I have.
Anyway, it was like he was like, I don't like the lyrics from Big Pimpin' anymore, right? And I'm like this, then take it off the market, right? So I remember at the time when Mace became a pastor and he was buying his albums back, right?
And was burning them Jones.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, his introspection and accountability said, let me take this off the market. And so he said, whatever it is, even if it's a burnt CD, I'm gonna pay $20 to get it out of your hands, right? And so for me, like this, that's something that I'll say is like a countercultural move.
Yeah, that definitely is countercultural.
Giving you money for the pool, and so like, it was like, yeah. So I guess accountability says like accountability has to look like action, not just accountability can't be introspective. Does that make sense?
It can't end at introspection.
It can't end.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just wanted to clarify what Jonas was saying. He wasn't saying it can't be. He was saying it can't end at introspection. Yeah. It's when you hold yourself responsible to the standard that you set after you had your introspection. That's why
you hurt.
And the people you hurt. But if you have the standard should include how you conduct yourself with yourself and how you conduct yourself with others. So accountability is when you hold yourself responsible and when you also allow other people to hold you responsible. Now, real quick, anybody ever have a time when they ain't want to be held accountable for something? Me. So y'all ain't never, y'all just willing to be held accountable for stuff.
I have a group of.
What was the question? Because again, this connection is horrible.
So the question was, anyone ever have a time when they didn't want to be held accountable?
Oh yeah.
A moment in time that changed, and he said, "Okay, yeah." No, I have
Definitely.
two sets of groups of guys who hold me accountable. Who will tell me if I'm off on something spiritually, tell me if I'm off on something financially, tell me if I was off on something conversationally. And there are different groups, there are different people for each thing, because I'm like, hey, like these are people who've been in my life, and I said it. You saw it sound weird when I said it. I had to change it. But been in my life, and someone says, "Hey, you've seen my growth from here in this realm and in this realm, right?" And these people come together at times, but I know that I can hear from this person in this particular realm, and so I set that up because I know, like, I can go on my own tangents of wanting to be right, and sometimes like this, if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But either way, I'm okay with both being known.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to not wanting accountability sometimes. Like, giving people permission. First of all, let me just say this. Accountability, I've learned, and some may disagree, but this is the lesson that keeps me mentally and emotionally healthy. It's my self-care method. Accountability must not just be desired on my part, it must be requested on the part of someone else. It is not my job to decide that somebody needs to accept my accountability, or someone needs to seek accountability. Kind of like advice. Advice is one of those lovely things. You can give it as much as you want. But if you really want to be intentional about it being received, you will wait for it to be requested.
Right. You don't want to give unsolicited advice.
Exactly. So unsolicited accountability is not accountability. It's you being drawn. And
give me an example of unsolicited accountability, because you saying a word right here. Like, what do you? Go ahead.
Okay, so say one of my illustrious co-hosts, is talking about how they about to start going to the gym every night, right? I'm like, all right, do it, Ayo, right? And that don't mean tomorrow I'm gonna text him and say, yo, did you go to the gym tonight? The only way that's gonna happen is if he say, yo, I'm trying to go to the gym. Can y'all check on me and make sure I'm doing such and such a thing?
So what you're saying is true accountability is intentional. It has intentionality behind it, which goes back to what Jonas was saying earlier. Because you have to have this level of introspection, which means before you have to know where you fall short. You can't ask somebody to hold you accountable to something when you don't even have an introspection to see where you are or standard by which they're going to hold you accountable to. Okay?
Absolutely.
What makes, for me... Go ahead, Jonas. Go ahead.
I was going to throw it here. I remember his pastor was preaching. He said, we don't like to be held accountable, and so we'll ignore that person on the street who looks like they're all dingy, and they just look to you and say, you wrong, and then walk away. You better, who are you to tell me I'm wrong? But it's like this, you didn't want that advice, but sometimes it comes that way because it's not the advice you want to hear, but it's still like, you're wrong, and you got to deal with it. Rather you ignore me or not, you got to deal with it.
So I'll give you an example of why accountability is important. Vampires, right? So I'm like, what? Vampires are I'm gonna come back to you in a second, Jeef. But vampires are the key example to me of why accountability is important, because it includes all of this. So you ever see a movie where they're fighting the vampire and they get bit? What do they usually do?
Denial.
They hide it. I ain't get bit. I ain't get bit. But you see them and you thinking, oh my God. Because you know what's about to happen. They about to turn and tear everybody up. That's what's about to happen. And so in one movie, I was watching this weird movie with that Brad Pitt where all them people turn to zombies, right? And so if the zombie bit you, you got turned into a zombie. And the Israeli female, she was a soldier. She got bit and she turns to Brad Pitt and she's freaking out. and within seconds, Brad Pitt just cuts her arm off. Whack! Because he realized that the blood has to reach throughout the whole body in order for you to be impacted. And her turning to him was her saying, hey, I need help. Even though what he had to do was so drastic that he had to cut her arm off, it saved the rest of her body. Some of us would allow our entire body to perish because we don't want to lose an arm. I'm just going to say it like that. We don't want to be held accountable by our friends who are willing to do something that is horrific. That can cause your friend trauma to cut your arm off. It can cause some of us, and I'll give you an example. What's an arm? An arm is sometimes a friend.
Yep.
An arm is sometimes a friend. Sometimes friend. I had one of the most loving things that one of my friends did when I said I'm not smoking weed no more. She said, I ain't gonna be around you. She didn't say so that's what going back to your point earlier, her standard was different than mine. She didn't give up her standard, but she said, I'm gonna hold you to yours. I have one of my close sisters. She's a doctor, Dr. Giordano. We do not have the same spiritual beliefs at all. At all. However, if she sees me slipping, she gonna say, whoa, Lee, what's this? And she'll say it in a way that's respectful. Why? Because she doesn't really, because we don't have the same belief system, she might not fully understand it. So she may be saying, well, you're not supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm fully well am supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z. So she's humble enough to try to hold me to my own standard. That is somebody who I can ask, hey, keep me accountable for this. I have another sister that I pray with every month. We do check-ins. Yo, how you doing? What's going with this? You good? Did you snap on this person? No, good. Praise God. Boom. I agree with Crystal. It has to be intentional. It has to be intentional. And to Jonas's point, it needs to be the person that you know has the foresight and the ability to speak to you in that particular way. Sometimes we I want this person to hold me accountable. And daggone well, they can't hold you accountable. Mm-mm. Because they gonna be convicted by their own stuff. So that, you get the person that's like, yeah, I don't care what we do. And you're like, yeah, can you hold me accountable? Now, daggone well, they ain't gonna hold you accountable. Not to the point that you know. Go ahead, Crystal.
Or and we kind of talked about codependent relationships before, but or you have this codependent relationship and you want your codependent to be the person that keeps you accountable, and you guys decide you're going to keep each other accountable. But if you're codependent, that person may not be willing to sacrifice their place in your life to call you your stuff.
Right. So they have to love you enough to leave you alone.
Yep.
They have to love you enough to hold you with an open hand. Go ahead, Jonas, before I read Ucheche say.
I just want to add to the entendre of the chopping off the arm, because he knew it and he didn't go through all the details. He just said, we're going to stop this right here.
Right. We're going to cut this off immediately. And I think a lot of times we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. Ucheche said, I don't mind being held accountable. I just can't take it from people that's doing the same thing they checking me on. Oh, hello, pot. Right? We spoke about this before. Get the plank before you help the person and point out the speck. Now, that does not mean that as I am helping myself that I can't say, hey, or what's going on with you? You see me working on a thing. It doesn't mean I have to be completely perfected in the thing, because if that's the case, can't nobody hold nobody accountable. It has to be you see me holding myself to that same standard and where I fall short. Or if I'm asking you to hold me accountable, or if I'm actually the person holding you accountable, don't go bring up my stuff when I go to bring up your stuff. And that means you been saw it. You ain't love me. If you, you do it. Well, why didn't you say something to me when I did it? Right. So I think it has to be mutual, and it has to be in line with our belief system. It has to be in line with our standards, our healthy standards, and it has to be in a way that's going to help promote health. And
wait, I got one more thing.
All right, we got 5 minutes.
All right, I know. One more thing. Accountability is not I'm gonna tell you all the ways you do stuff that irritate me.
Woo!
Like, I want you to change in all of the ways that piss me off. So I'm just keeping you accountable. No, accountability is not just about how you are affected by a person's behavior. Just need to put that out there.
I was it
Exactly.
sounds a little bit
That's
like parenting in the sense where it's like where we kind of scratched on it last episode where it's like all the things that annoyed me now I'm putting into this child, and so I'm making a mini me of things I didn't like
Yep.
and like right, and it's like this, but I don't. That's not me though, right? And so yeah,
Yep. And so the last thing that we're going to talk about of our points is self-care.
Mhm.
The last thing we need to do is make sure we take care of ourselves. Now, please know, I'm going to tell you what self-care is not before I tell you what it is. Self-care is not going Amazon shopping when you don't have no money and you keep buying a bunch of stuff that causes financial debt. That's not self-care. Self-care is not self-centeredness.
Mm.
That's not self-care either. Self-care is when you properly steward every aspect of who it is that you are in a way that causes you to bring joy, peace, and comfort,
Mm.
so that you actually can operate at a more optimal level. For instance, the to Jonas's point about his grandparents and his great grandparents, they didn't practice self-care because they were busy surviving
Surviving.
often. What happens is that other people love them. Okay, so it's very common to hear of grandpops who, or even grandmothers who had these physically laborious jobs, and what would happen? The young people would come in the house and rub their feet. They would massage their hands, right? So self-care is when you being self-aware enough to know, wait, something is off, and I need to get my hands massaged. I need to take care of myself so that I am more effective at doing the things that I'm supposed to do. We've turned self-care into selfishness
Mhm.
often. And in other times, we don't even practice self-care at all. So really quick, does anyone have any examples? I'm looking in the chat. Any examples of that they have of self-care?
I have one. I know I'm you guys know I'm all about, mindfulness recently. Um and I will be honest, growing up in my 20s, people would say, practice deep breathing or practice this or practice that. And I didn't really see the value in it, but I really, in my 40s, I'm seeing late 30s into 40s, I'm seeing the value in it and the importance of just taking that time. So much so that I start my activities with my students with 5 minutes. We call it our 5 minutes. They don't really know the term mindfulness. I'm teaching them, but it's our 5 minutes and it's our transition time. And we pay attention to our breathing. We pay attention to our body. We do different exercises. Sometimes we just listen to music and put our heads down. And what I'm teaching them is that it's so important to stop and to pay attention to yourself, to pay attention to how you feel, to pay attention to how you're breathing, pay attention to your body. Um, yeah, I think it's good for me, even though I'm doing it for them. It's comforting and calming to me. So that's like my thing that I'm trying to be insistent to do. And then working out, man. Let me tell y'all, and do something fun. Don't do nothing all extra strenuous that you're not going to enjoy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do extra strenuous stuff all the time when I
Oh
work
well, I
out, and I
like to do
enjoy it
so.
in the end. Um, so, but she said do something physical, like exercise. For those who don't know, studies, there's empirical data that shows a half hour of exercise a day does the same amount for individuals who have mild to moderate major depressive disorder as antidepressants, psychotropic meds. That's how important physical exercise is. So yes, physical exercise. Also, where are your joys in life? Where are the things that you are joyful about? What are the things that you are like excited that bring you like that tap into what you feel as though is in line with your purpose and your standard and all those other things. Do those things. There's a scripture in I think it's either Philippians or one of the Thessalonians. It's Philippians. It says whatever's Philippians 4. Thank you. Whatever's pure, whatever's noble. She's so spiritual. And it talks about whatever's holy, whatever's true. Focus on these things, right? So I think it's important, especially when you have really quick algorithms that are created and sustained by you clicking on certain things. So the more you click on certain things on these devices, it will send you more of those things, creating an echo chamber of what it is that you clicked on. So all of a sudden you in your echo chamber affects your worldview. And therefore you're surrounded by this. We're saying sometimes you need to unplug, restart, log out, reset your algorithm, and focus on the positive things. She spoke about mindfulness. There are a lot of apps. Calm is a nice app. You can YouTube ways to do deep breathing. And lastly, I'm going to say this. Somebody said self-care is uniquely individual. Know thyself. Introspection. That's true. That is very true. I'm going to say this really quick. He said Elder Cox spoke about no rest. He said, y'all on point. I went to a doctor for high blood pressure. Blood pressure was through the roof. He said he eats clean, but his situation was toxic. No rest. Yep. He said he never knew until he went to get a checkup. So the Bible commands rest for a reason, so that we can become in tune with what's going on. The purpose of mindfulness is so that we can practice being aware of what's going on in our worlds, in our body, so that we can regulate our body, so that we can thrive in our worlds. It is just that simple, right? But it's hard to do because we live in a rat race where everything's like this. And lastly, another thing that I would like to say is a form of self-care is actually helping other people. There is a joy that you get when you help others. No matter where you are in life, you can still help somebody. It causes you to not be self-centered, and it actually allows you to benefit from leaning into others' situations. It increases your empathy and actually releases serotonin in your brain. So we practice self-care by making sure that we do the things that bring us joy, working out physically, having hobbies, working on the things that ignite our healthy passions and are in line with our purpose, as well as helping others. That's it, y'all. We spoke about 5 things. Somebody said, I agree. Breathe, move, think, foundation. Yep. Get a natural exercise program and get people to hold you accountable to that particular exercise program that you have. So folks, we went through a number of things. We wrapping up part 2 of Triggers and Trauma. I'm looking at my show sheet right now. And for those of you who are like, why is she looking to the side? I'm either looking at comments or the show sheet. So we wrapped it up. We talked about the importance of introspection or self-inventory, having healthy standards, accountability. We talked about a healthy tribe and community. We didn't focus that much on it, but that's important too. A healthy tribe and a healthy community, as well as self-care. Really quick about a healthy tribe and a healthy community. They're going to want the best for you. They're going to want the best for you. And they're always going to be like striving for the best. Practically speaking, this may sound weird Every day you get up, make your bed up. Make your bed up. Every day you get up, make your bed up. It may sound weird. It teaches you discipline. It teaches, I know sometimes we get older, we're like, I don't feel like, make it up. It teaches you discipline, because the moment you keep making your bed up, all of a sudden you start noticing other things that you need to work on, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And sometimes when we allow where we are to begin to dilapidate, it's a sign that we're really going through some stuff, because we're not focused on our environment. With that having been said, anyone want to say anything? We went 6 minutes over. Anyone want to say anything?
Nope, you got it.
All right. So y'all know what it is. Love God, love your neighbor, and make sure you take care of yourself. All right, folks. Peace.